What if I told you that the man who would one day walk through the glass doors of Wall Street once slept in the doorway of a boarded-up building with nothing but a duffel bag, a dead phone, and a question that refused to leave him alone? Is this really where my story ends? This is not fiction. This is not a movie. This is the true story of Marcus Cole. And if you think you already know how it ends, I promise you, you don't. Detroit, December 2008. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin, it crawls into your chest and squeezes. Marcus Cole, just 24 years old, sat on a flattened cardboard box outside a shuttered grocery store on Gradient Avenue, watching a city fall apart around him and wondering if he was falling apart with it. 2 years earlier, he had been the first person in his entire family to earn a university scholarship, studying economics, dreaming of a future built on numbers and ambition. Then, one morning, his mother collapsed mid-shift at the factory where she had worked for 19 years. A stroke. The medical bills arrived before she was even out of the hospital. Marcus dropped out that same week, picked up every odd job he could find, and held on for as long as he could, until the recession stripped those jobs away too, and the apartment followed. And then, everything else. By December, he had nothing left but a worn duffel bag, a stubborn mind, and one daily ritual that kept him going. Every morning, the moment the Detroit Public Library opened its doors, Marcus walked in. Not just for the warmth, for the Wi-Fi, for the knowledge. While others scrolled and dozed, he sat at a corner computer and studied financial markets, economic theory, Wall Street news, scribbling notes in the margins of a folded newspaper because he had no pen and no notebook, but he absolutely refused to stop learning. It was on one of those gray Tuesday afternoons that a silver-haired librarian named Eleanor Briggs stopped beside his screen, looked at the Wall Street Journal article he was deep in, and said 6 words that would quietly change everything. You actually understand what you're reading? Marcus looked up. He didn't know it yet, but the woman standing beside him had spent 30 years training financial minds, and in all that time, she had never once walked over to a stranger to ask that question. Until today, that Thursday, Marcus Cole walked into Eleanor Briggs's classroom with $2 in his pocket and fire in his eyes. She had personally mentored analysts who now managed billions. She had never invited a stranger to her class, not once, in 30 years. So ask yourself, what did Eleanor see in this homeless young man that he could not yet see in himself? Stay with us, because part 2 is where everything begins to change. Thursday evening arrived and Marcus Cole almost didn't go. He stood outside the 5th Street Community Center for a full 3 minutes in the freezing cold, hands buried in his pockets, telling himself he didn't belong in there, that a man sleeping on cardboard had no business sitting in a financial class with people who had homes, stability, and futures already mapped out. But then, he thought about his mother, about the factory, about every door that had been slammed in his face over the last 2 years, and something inside him, that same stubborn fire that kept dragging him to the library every morning, pushed him through that door. The room was small and warmly lit. 12 plastic chairs arranged in a circle. A whiteboard with the words "Money is a language. Are you fluent?" written across it in bold black marker. And at the front, Eleanor Briggs standing with her arms folded and her eyes already scanning the door as if she had been expecting him. She gave him one single nod. No fanfare, no welcome speech, just a nod that said, "Good, you came, now sit down and pay attention." That first class cracked something open in Marcus. Eleanor didn't teach money the way he had read about it in textbooks. She taught it like survival. She explained how the wealthy think differently about every dollar, not as something to spend, but as a soldier to deploy. She talked about compounding, about leverage, about the quiet war being fought every day between those who understood the financial system and those who simply lived inside it without question. Marcus filled both sides of a torn paper bag with notes that night because he still had no notebook. Eleanor saw it. She didn't say a word. She simply slid a brand new legal pad across the table toward him at the end of class without making eye contact, as if it had always been his. He came back the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that, and every single Thursday for the next 4 months. But it was in the 6th week that everything shifted, because Eleanor pulled him aside after class, looked him dead in the eye, and said something that would echo in his mind for the rest of his life. She said, "Marcus, you don't just understand this material, you think in it. And that is extraordinarily rare. So I need you to stop treating this classroom like a shelter and start treating it like a launch pad, because I have one contact, one single phone call I am willing to make on your behalf, and I will not make it until I believe you are truly ready. So tell me, when are you going to decide that you are ready?" The room was empty. The fluorescent light hummed above them, and Marcus, for the first time in 2 years, felt something he had almost forgotten the name of. Hope. Real, specific, terrifying hope. Eleanor had one phone call, one contact, a name she had protected and never used lightly in 30 years of teaching. And she was ready to spend it on a 24-year-old man with no degree, no address, and no resume. But before she picked up that phone, she gave Marcus one final test. A test so simple it sounds almost insulting, and yet it was the one thing that separated everyone she had ever taught from the very few who actually made it. What was the test? And did Marcus pass it? That is exactly where part 3 begins. The test Eleanor gave Marcus was not a written exam. There were no numbers to crunch, no theory to recite, no case study to analyze. She simply handed him a single blank sheet of paper and said, "I want you to come back next Thursday and show me one page that proves you have taken everything you have learned in this room and applied it to your own real life. Not theory, not someone else's story, yours." Then she picked up her coat and walked out. Marcus stood in that empty classroom for a long time, staring at the blank page in his hands. One page. It sounded simple. It was the hardest thing anyone had ever asked him to do. Because applying knowledge to your own life means first being brutally honest about what your life actually looks like, and Marcus had spent 2 years trying not to look at it too closely. But that night, sitting under the overhang of a closed laundromat with a borrowed pen and that single sheet of paper balanced on his knee, he wrote. He wrote about every dollar he had touched in the past month, where it came from, where it went, and whether it had worked for him or against him. He wrote about his skills, his gaps, and the one asset nobody had ever been able to take from him, his mind. He wrote a personal balance sheet, not of wealth, but of potential. And when he read it back, something shifted. For the first time, he didn't see a homeless man. He saw a portfolio of untapped value sitting in a broken container, and the container, he realized, was fixable. The following Thursday, he placed that page in front of Eleanor. She read it in silence. The whole room waited. Then she folded it carefully, slid it into her bag, looked up at Marcus and said, "You passed." 2 words. That was all. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small white business card. She placed it face down on the table, pressed 2 fingers on top of it, and slid it slowly toward him. "His name is Raymond Holt," she said. "He runs a small private investment firm in Chicago. We went to university together 40 years ago. I have never sent him a student cold. I called him last week. He is expecting your name. What happens next is entirely up to you." Marcus turned the card over. Black ink, clean font, a Chicago address, a phone number. and a title beneath the name that read Managing Director. His hands were steady, his heartbeat was not. A managing director at a private investment firm in Chicago was waiting for a phone call from a man with no degree, no fixed address, and nothing but a personal balance sheet written on a borrowed pen and a piece of paper balanced on his knee outside a laundromat. Most people in Marcus's position would have held that card for weeks, afraid to dial, afraid to hear the word no. Marcus called the next morning at 6:45 a.m. What Raymond Holt said when he picked up that phone and what he asked Marcus to do next is the moment this story stops being about survival and starts being about destiny. That is exactly where part 4 takes us. At 6:45 in the morning, standing outside a Detroit convenience store in the same jacket he had been wearing for 3 months, Marcus Cole dialed Raymond Holt's number. His phone had 11% battery. He had one shot. The line rang twice. Then a voice, calm, clipped, unhurried, answered. Raymond Holt. Marcus introduced himself, told him Eleanor had given him the number. There was a pause on the other end, not an uncomfortable one, but the kind of pause that belongs to a man who measures every word before he spends it. Then Raymond said, Eleanor told me about you. She said you think in the language of markets. I want to find out if she is right. I am going to ask you one question. Take your time. There is no trick. Ready? Marcus said yes. Raymond said, if you had $1,000 right now and no safety net, not a single dollar more in the world, what would you do with it? Marcus didn't hesitate for even half a second. He said, I wouldn't spend it and I wouldn't save it. I would study the 3 most undervalued microcap stocks trading on the OTC market right now, pick the one with the strongest insider buying signal, and put $800 in. I'd keep $200 liquid as a hedge. Then I would document every decision and every outcome in writing, because the real asset isn't the return, it's the track record of disciplined thinking I'd be building. Silence. 4 full seconds of silence on the other end of the line. Then, Raymond Holt said something that Marcus would never forget for the rest of his life. He said, get yourself to Chicago. I'll have my assistant book you a bus ticket. You start Monday as an unpaid research intern. You will work harder than everyone in this office, and you will be paid nothing for 60 days. After 60 days, if you are still here and still sharp, we will talk about your future. Eleanor has never been wrong about a student in 40 years. Don't make her wrong about you. Marcus's phone died at 9% battery the moment the call ended. He stood on that Detroit sidewalk, in the cold, in that worn jacket, with nothing but a bus ticket coming to an email address he'd have to access at the library, and he smiled. Not because the hard part was over, but because for the first time in 2 years, the hard part finally had a direction. 3 days later, he boarded a Greyhound bus to Chicago with $43 in his pocket, 1 change of clothes in his duffel bag, and Raymond Holt's business card tucked into his shoe so he wouldn't lose it. The next 60 days would test him in ways he never expected. Long nights studying portfolios he wasn't paid to analyze, weekends spent in the office when everyone else had gone home, and one moment in week 4 where Raymond pulled him into his office, closed the door, and said with a perfectly straight face, half my team has a master's degree, and not one of them has shown me what you showed me in this morning's brief. Where did you study? Marcus looked at him steadily and said, a community center on 5th Street, and a library, and a cardboard box on Gratiot Avenue. Raymond held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, the same nod Eleanor had given Marcus that very first Thursday night, and said, good. That is exactly the kind of education this industry is missing. On day 61, Raymond Holt offered Marcus Cole a paid position, not as an intern, as a junior analyst. from a cardboard box in Detroit to a junior analyst desk in Chicago in less than 8 months. But this is not where the story ends. Because what Marcus built over the next 7 years, the walls he hit, the moment he almost walked away from everything, and the single decision that finally took him through the doors of Wall Street, that is the part of this story that nobody talks about. And that is exactly what Part 5 will show you. 7 years. That is how long it took. And those 7 years were not a straight line, they were a war. Marcus Cole spent 3 of them at Raymond Holt's firm in Chicago, building a track record so clean and so consistent that other firms began to take notice. He earned his financial certification studying at night after 12-hour days. He slept on a pull-out sofa in a shared apartment for the first 2 years because every dollar he earned went either to his mother's medical bills or back into his own education. There were moments of doubt so heavy they felt physical. Nights where he sat alone at his desk at 2 a.m, staring at spreadsheets, asking himself if any of this was actually going to matter. There was one specific night in year 3 when a senior analyst at the firm, a man with an Ivy League degree and a corner office, told Marcus directly in front of colleagues that he would never belong in the upper floors of this industry, that there was a ceiling above him and it was made of something harder than glass. Marcus went home that night, sat in the dark for 1 hour, and then opened his laptop and started working on the most detailed market analysis report he had ever written. He submitted it to Raymond the next morning without a word. Raymond forwarded it to 3 of his contacts on Wall Street the same afternoon. 2 of them responded within 48 hours. One of them was a managing partner at a premier investment bank in New York City. His name is not important. What he said is, he said, "I don't know who wrote this, but I want them in my building." 14 months later, on a Tuesday morning in the spring, Marcus Cole stepped out of a taxi on Broadway in Lower Manhattan. He was wearing a charcoal suit he had saved 4 months to buy. He had his mother's photograph in his breast pocket, the same woman who had worked 19 years in a factory so that her son could have a chance she never got. He stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the building in front of him, glass and steel stretching toward a sky so blue it almost didn't look real. The same hands that had once pressed against the cold concrete of a Detroit doorway now straightened his tie. The same mind that had once scribbled notes on a folded newspaper now carried analyses that moved real money. He walked through those glass doors. He rode the elevator to the 14th floor, and when the receptionist looked up and asked for his name, he said it clearly, without apology, without hesitation, "Marcus Cole. I'm the new analyst." That evening, he called Eleanor Briggs. The phone rang 4 times. She picked up. He said, "I'm in, Eleanor. I made it." There was a long pause on the other end, and then, in that warm, unhurried voice that had once stopped beside a library computer and asked a homeless young man if he truly understood what he was reading, she said, "No, Marcus. I never doubted it for a single day." From a cardboard box on Gratiot Avenue to the 14th floor of a Wall Street investment bank. Not because life handed him anything, not because the odds were in his favor, but because on the coldest night of his life, when every reason to quit was standing right in front of him, he chose, one more time, to keep going. And that is the story of Marcus Cole, a story about what happens when hunger meets direction, when desperation meets discipline, and when one person, just one person, decides to see something in you before you can. See it in yourself. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something you had almost given up on, or if it lit something back up inside you that had gone quiet, then you are exactly where you are supposed to be. This is the success storyline, where we don't just tell you that success is possible. We show you, one real story at a time, exactly what it looked like from the inside. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Success Storyline right now, because the next story we tell might be the one that changes everything for you. The way Eleanor Briggs changed everything for Marcus. Every great journey begins with someone else's story showing you what yours could look like. This is yours. Welcome to the Success Storyline.